My name is Zach Olson.
Hi, Zach.
Hi.
All right, so what's your major?
Art, two-dimensional.
How do you see yourself as a creative? Or do you see yourself as a creative?
I didn't used to. Well, I grew up homeschooled and there weren't very many opportunities for me to kind of hone my artistic talent, but I always really liked to draw.
Right.
And I always had cool, like, pictures of characters and stuff kind of come up in my head, or when I'd be talking to somebody, it was just like a natural part of how I visualize things or how I process information. So I always kind of kept sketching and stuff, even though they weren't technically the best drawings.
How does your art represent you, like as a person?
I think anything someone makes will come, parts of who you are will come through naturally as you make something. Like, if you had a room full of 20 students and you assign them all to draw the same picture, every single picture would be different.
Right.
One of my teachers, one of my first drawing classes, remarked that I always situated myself in the room in like a way that I couldn't be, like no one could see what I was doing. I always had I had my own space. I always had my back kind of turned to everybody. So, and then my easel propped up, so it was just literally blocking everybody out. And that was mostly because I was just insecure through not having as much training as some of the other kids who came into the art department came in with. And I felt like it was about being good rather right away than learning. Well, one big thing I learned was that things are always salvageable, and that the image you see in your head is rarely going to be what comes across. That's just part of the translation of an idea to a physical manifestation. You can always save your artwork. Really, when you come to realize that there is no right look to something, it's the process of it being created. You can keep pushing it until you're happy with it. These on the wall here, I actually have deliberately, with a lot of them, pushed them to a place that I wasn't comfortable and that I didn't like them by putting down a color that I didn't necessarily want on there, or making a mark where I knew I didn't want it, and then that took the work to a place where I had to save it and I had to make decisions. Where if you come to an artwork with a complete attack plan in mind, where you know exactly what you want to make, you know exactly how you want it to be positioned, and you know exactly what colors you want to use and everything, it'll a lot of times, at least in my experience, come across as stagnant because you don't have a dialogue going with your piece. I grew up in a pretty religious home, not as religious as some people's, but there was a lot of that going on. And the book of Revelation, for those who don't know, is like the biblical apocalypse or end of time. And my dad would read me these stories from that book when I was a kid. And I just remember them really impacting me, especially a lot of the descriptions of the creatures in it. I actually started drawing. I just felt really compelled to kind of draw it, and I think that was maybe out of kind of a desire to want to reclaim part of my childhood, just because so much of it was wrapped up in religion. I wanted to make my own interpretation of all that stuff I grew up with. I wasn't going to use any of the ideas for this subject matter-wise and everything. Obviously, it's kind of trying to capture my experience with reading it, but what I'm doing is just reading portions of it and then sketching the visualization that I have and then forming compositions. Right now what I'm trying to do is establish kind of a cast of characters. So with the top one, with the kind of lamb figure there, they refer to, I believe, Jesus as the lamb that was slain. So I did a literal lamb just because that was what was written. There are descriptions of angels that are surrounding the throne of God that are covered in eyes. And the third piece there, I think part of what's so scary about, or what it got to me as a kid about reading Revelation, was that the bonds between, or the kind of divide between the spiritual and the physical was broken at that point. And part of what makes it so freaky is just, you know, having existence be such that you could be walking in the park and see these, you know, creatures or figures, just they're a part of life now. The seven-headed dragon that comes from the sea and utters blasphemies. This far one with all the colors is supposed to be like an angel that it emits like a prism around him. Satan's described as a serpent, or the great serpent, a number of times, so that's what the theme is there. There are angels that are also described as giant wheels covered in eyes, so that's what that one is. And this one represents me kind of working, now that I've established what the angels covered in eyes that fly around the throne and cry out look like. I'm trying to kind of work them into as a compositional element.
So what's the story behind your tattoos? Why so many?
I actually waited until I was 20 to get my first tattoo. Just because there's, I think, kind of like an initial fear that comes with making a permanent mark on your body.
And how old are you now?
22.
22. You have that many. Cool.
So essentially, I found a piece. I was trying to think, because my biggest fear was getting something that would be tacky when I was older. Because I knew a lot of people, or I'd seen a lot of tattoos that turned out that way, where the person got something when they were young, and then styles changed, times changed, and the tattoo's stupid. So I was trying to think of things that could be timeless, and I thought, well, art is a timeless thing. You know, you never look at a painting and go, that's lame. You know, you just examine it kind of as a product of its time. So I made the decision to get this clock, which is a Salvador Dali clock, just because I was really into like surreal. I still am into surrealism. And he made that piece to illustrate like that time is irrelevant when you're dreaming, which I thought was kind of like an elegant concept. And then I got this moth here as my second one, just because it's I've always liked that moths are attracted to light, and I found that kind of analogous with like the human quest for truth. And then that's also kind of an allusion to Dali, because he uses moths in his work a lot. And then I kind of just came to the realization that like I could do a sleeve of pieces that have like impacted me or changed me throughout my life. So I went through kind of like picked up pieces and stuff that I liked. And then I ran into people asking me still, you know, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you? And honestly, I'm at a point now where I feel like just the sheer fact that I like it means something. I don't have to have a huge elaborate backstory to everything that I do. I can just be like, these pieces of art have defined my taste in art, and I'm an artist, and leave it at that. It doesn't have to be so huge and profound. This one also, when I was, I had like a three or 4 year period where like a lot of stuff was going on, just like starting school and like a girl I was dating at the time, and like kind of trying to find myself, and everything within like a month, everything just kind of came to a halt. It like, me and that girl broke up, I figured out what I wanted to do, all of this stuff. And since this is kind of like a sea reference, but it's also more surreal because it's a man carrying the masts and sails, I found it kind of to be about just like setting sail, kind of starting your journey.
Right.
But again, not a huge deep concept. It means something to me, but it's not like super profound.
For other creatives, what do you have like any advice or anything to motivate an artist who feels like art is not smart, or art is not, or creativity is, because it's so different, it's wrong in a sense?
That's like really complicated, because there's a component of I like making images, I like creating, I do it for me. And a lot of people create for themselves.
Are you telling people that they need to be a little selfish when it comes to being a creative?
I think they do, but I also think it's a difficult catch-22, because you do need to keep in mind how your art is going to be perceived or received by other people. So for example, it feels really good to just splatter paint on something and then kind of play with it a little bit, but it's not always a visually engaging thing. On the same token, you know, someone might make a play, write a play, and it's like the best thing they've ever done for themselves. They just worked a bunch of their own things out, and they feel like it's their best work, and everyone sees it and hates it. And I think you do need to do things for you and make those things, like throw that paint on, on the surface and play with it, write the play, but keep in mind how your artwork is received, because I have sold a few pieces in the last year. I have my artwork up in a shop downtown, and the pieces I sell are the ones where I'm consciously aware that this is a piece people will like. Whereas with the Revelation series I'm doing here now, this is for me, and I don't care how it's received.
So in general, do you do art for you, or do you do art for other people?
It's all for me. I always enjoy the process of making it, and obviously I like all of my ideas. I'm not going to stick with an idea that I hate. But yeah, no, it's always for me.